The Vikings offseason is rumbling. There's lots of talks. Kirk Cousins is still our quarterback, but hey, Lamar Jackson is knocking on the door. I did just see on bookies.com the odds for the team that Lamar Jackson ends up playing for in 2023 has the Tennessee Titans as the heavy favorite, but right behind them is the Minnesota Vikings, and then third behind them, Baltimore Ravens. Where do you think he ends up playing in 2023? Where would you place your bets?
Right now, I think he's going to spend the season as a Raven. I don't think we're seeing Lamar move this offseason. It's a lot of talk. He wants out, but I don't think the Ravens are ready to trade him away. I think they're going to kind of make him stick around until can hit free agency, but I find it so unlikely that we make a move for Lamar this year. I think with the recent restructuring of Kirk's deal, that kind of makes it, this is looking like it's the last ride with Kirk. I see it way more likely that we go to the draft to find our next quarterback than trying to make a drastic move right now, getting Lamar.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, what if right now I was like, hey, Adam Schefter just tweeted out that the Vikings are making a trade for Lamar Jackson. They're trading a bunch of picks. And Kirk Cousins going to another team. Let's just pretend. Are you happy about it, or would you rather that we make it through the year with Kirk Cousins?
I mean, when you talk about Lamar Jackson, you're talking about just a generational NFL quarterback. Like, this guy is unreal. You put the ball in his hands and good things just happen. And with such a great offensive mind like Kevin O'Connell, Lamar, Jefferson, like that offense has best offense in the league written all over it. However, I also think we can run a really good offense with Kirk. We saw that last year. It was one of the most efficient Vikings offenses we've seen the past 5 years. So it's like, I think making a drastic move like that and we don't even know if we get Lamar past that season. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it, but if we got Lamar, I mean, I'm not going to be upset of getting all pro quarterback. Yeah.
That kind of feels like that's the overall feeling of most Vikings fans is like, hey, I'll take it, but I don't need it, So that's a good spot to be in, because obviously, like you said, our offense was clicking last year. It was historically good for the Vikings, breaking some records on some ends. But our defense was an absolute shit show.
No bueno.
Say. And obviously, that ended up falling on Ed Donatel. There were lots of issues, but the Vikings fired him. January 16th. It was, almost felt like overdue. Felt like he should have been fired earlier in the year. But, hey, they made it that far. They made it through the season. You gotta put it up to KOC for standing by his guy. But you had to move on. It had to happen, and it did. And now they're transitioning after signing Brian Flores. I know on the last podcast we did, you really touted Flores. Is he the guy that you wanted to end up getting? And what kind of things could we see from him? Different from Donatel.
Absolutely. He was my guy all offseason. He showed a lot of promise as a defensive coordinator in his year in Miami. He ran a lot of these man coverage, blitz heavy schemes, a lot of zero formation looks, which is the complete opposite of what Donatel is doing. He was running a lot of zone coverage, having guys sit back and just rushing for and hoping they got to him in time. And it just did not work whatsoever. And I think my biggest issue with Donatel is we had the guys. We had a lot of elite defensive talent on that team, and we're just continuously struggling week in and week out. I just find it hard to believe that it's on the 11 guys on the field. I always personally thought it was more Donatel. So having a complete 180 in our defensive scheme and system, it can't get much worse. So I'm super excited to see what Flores does with this defense.
Yeah, for sure. I think everybody is. And obviously, like you said, it's hard to pin it on the players when they weren't too young, they weren't too old. You had veterans like Patrick Peterson, but you also had young guys stepping up. I mean, they had the core, it felt like, of a very good defensive team. But I think they ended up in either last or second to last in everybody's rankings. I mean, it's not great. But speaking of some veterans that moved on, obviously Patrick Peterson moved on, and we ended up also releasing Eric Kendricks. But this was really just to shed cap, right? I mean, would you... Yeah, what's your thoughts on the Eric Kendricks released? It's kind of sad, but...
It is. You're talking about a guy who's been a cornerstone of our defense for the past 7 years or whatever it is. I don't think any Vikings fan is happy to see him go, but the Vikings were in pure cap hell. They needed to do anything and everything to fix this situation so they could actually make some moves this offseason. And part of that is seeing guys you love go,
Yep.
I think it's part of the game. You don't want to see your favorite players leave your team, but there's a time and place, and it was Kendrick's time.
Yep. And it was a time for Vikings fans to get used to losing a few other players that they love, obviously.
Yeah.
Mr. Mankato, Mr. Adam Thielen, and, Cam Dantzler. We cut a few guys, but Thielen, that's just, it was heartbreaking. We knew it was coming. We knew it had to happen. We said it had to happen. His wife said some things that had to happen, but there was lots of drama around it that probably didn't need to be there in my mind. But in the end, Adam Thielen is going to be with the Carolina Panthers. What's your thoughts on, obviously, one, the Vikings no longer have Adam Thielen. Where do you see somebody stepping up who's going to be that new number 2 guy? And also, do you think Adam Thielen is a number 1 guy out in Carolina? Is he going to have a better season than he could have had here in Minnesota if he restructured or something?
I think on your last part, I think a better season is all dependent on what do you see as a better season. A team that's going to make a playoff run, or you can go be the wide receiver 1 on a bottom 10 team in the league. So, if he's looking to put up numbers and get a bag, then I think he made the right decision of getting out, go be somewhere where he can go see 100 targets in a year. Whereas, if you want to have a chance at making a run in the postseason, you restructure. And he showed that wasn't where his value is at, or where his values were at. So he decided it was time to go. And, you're talking about a receiver pushing into his 30s, doesn't have the same juice that he had. And it's just, again, part of the game. You hate to see, a hometown guy who's grown up here, played college ball here, played his whole pro career here. To have him, watch him walk away is never going to be an easy thing. But I think I'm totally behind the time for Thielen to go. And I think we're in a position to do that right now. KJ Osborne is showing flashes of being a seriously talented player in this league. There's not much left free agency wise. I know Odell's still out there. The talent's obviously there. I think the biggest question mark with him is the locker room stuff and off the field stuff. We don't really want to add distractions to this offense. So I'm a little hesitant on him, but there's a lot of really, really talented receivers in this draft. So there's some options for the Vikings right now, and I don't think losing Thielen is going to disrupt our offense too much.
Yeah, and personally, I think KJ Osborne is freaking amazing. I love watching him play. I think he could definitely step up. He's obviously not going to be a number 1, but I think he's good enough to be a number 1 on some teams. Not behind Jefferson, but nobody is.
Can't do that.
Yeah. Speaking of some other guys on the team, we re-signed Nick Mullins for 2 years, $4 million. Garrett Bradbury, 3 years, $15 million. Greg Joseph got another year. I do like a 1-year deal on a kicker, I'll be honest. I don't want to put him in.
Especially a Vikings kicker.
Yes. So I'm happy with that. What are your thoughts on any of those other deals? And then we'll talk about some of the free agents they've added.
Yeah, I think getting Nick Mullins back, I love that. From the preseason action and the few snaps he got during the regular season, I always thought he looked very confident, looked very decisive in the pocket. So I love him as our backup, totally behind that. Bringing back Garrett Bradbury, again, started off his career a little slow, but the past few seasons we've seen him really take some big strides in his game. So for $5 a year, for 3 years, I'm totally behind that, love that. And Greg Joseph, we saw some struggles towards the end of last year, but if you look past that, he's been a very consistent player. So I have no problem with the Vikings taking another year with him. And yeah, I think overall, we're keeping good guys and getting rid of the guys that need to go. So I think those were all good moves.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, one other signing, too, that I didn't just mention is obviously Alexander Mattison and restructuring Harrison Smith. Do you have any thoughts on some of those guys coming back, too?
Yeah.
Madison specifically, what's your thoughts?
I absolutely love it. I am a huge Madison fan. He's one of the most efficient runners in this league, and to get him for $3.5 million a year is an absolute steal. Honestly, in my opinion, I think we should be seen a lot closer to a split between him and Cook. I know it's kind of a hot take, but I'm a huge fan of bringing him back. I would have been really upset to see him go. And Harrison Smith restructuring, taking a little less money to stay with the team. I think, obviously he's lost a step in his game, getting a little older, but just being a good veteran presence in the locker room and for that defensive squad, I think is a huge bonus. So I'm definitely happy about that too.
Yeah, I agree. And we've talked about on the podcast in the past, Dalvin Cook and Madison and the team that they are, but do you think that we see Madison eventually passing Cook and playing in rushes or anything, or do we actually still think that Cook could get traded? I know we've talked a lot about that. What do you think could happen there?
Cook getting traded is 100% a possibility. I don't think it's very likely at this point. I think we're going to kind of see, I find it hard to see Madison just purely outplaying and taking Cook's spot unless, whether it be injury or other factors, whatever. Yeah. But I just find that hard to believe. But I do think we're going to see Madison creep into Cook's touches more and more throughout the year.
And, the fact that deal ended up being so cheap for Madison, only $3.5 million a year, makes me think they're paying him as a backup or as a secondary, I should say, runner, but not as a
primary ball carrier. Yeah.
Right, yeah. If they had came out and been like, hey, we're giving Alexander Madison like $8.5 million a year, you'd be like, Cook's gone.
Yeah, for sure.
That's it. It's over. But they didn't do that, so it looks like he's sticking around.
No, and I think having both of those guys in your backfield is a huge bonus because, running backs get injured all the time. So to have two guys that you can trust to just, go be a primary guy, a 25-touch guy, I think that's a huge bonus to have.
Yeah, for sure. And just, when you make a couple of those runs that are big runs, you just need a breather or two. That's huge too. So they're not getting too worn down in a single game. I'm all for it. Marcus Davenport, Byron Murphy, cornerback, Josh Oliver, tight end. What do you think of some of these ads? Those are kind of the main free agent ads we've really made so far, right? I mean, is there any that to you is like that is a big deal?
For me right now, my favorite free agent addition is probably Byron Murphy. Davenport's a close second. But I think you're talking about a secondary who was statistically one of the worst in the league last year. I mean, we need all the help we can get, and getting a young guy like that, he spent a lot of last year injured and only played 9 games, but years before that, we've seen flashes that this guy can be something special, and I love him kind of being our cornerback number 1 for the year. I think 2 years, $17.5 million, it's not too much money. Huge fan of that signing. Marcus Davenport bringing in some edge pressure, outside linebacker. Got him only 1 year for $13 million, but a guy who really had a quiet 2022, but he's had a 9-sack season in 2021, and again, kind of seen those flashes. Had a down year. I like the move. I mean, our defense kind of felt like it needed all the help it can get based on how bad it was doing. So I like those moves. Josh Oliver, 3 years, $21 million.
Is he kind of the replacement then as a backup? I mean, that's a lot of money for a backup tight end. Obviously, we've got T.J. Hawkinson, but
it is a lot of money for a backup tight end, especially one that only has 230 career receiving yards. I personally do not know much about Josh Oliver. I hadn't really heard of him before this trade. My guess is he's bringing a lot more in the run blocking game. That's the only way I can rationalize that much money for a backup tight end that barely's made noise in the league. So I really don't know much about him, so I could be totally wrong. But as of now, until I see something, I'm not loving that addition.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about with Madison, I mean, if you're paying a guy, $7 million a year, that is, whatever, that's It's a lot of money. You're paying him twice what you're paying Madison, so you're obviously planning on using him. You're not planning on just like having him sit out and just chill. Like maybe they're going to run couple tight ends out there at times. Maybe they're going to be trying to use Hawkinson as something more than a tight end. I don't know. Maybe KOC's got something up his sleeve, but I'm excited to see what happens there because they definitely have plans for Josh Oliver. That's for sure.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to trust the process with KOC. He's smarter than us, so just going to let him do his thing.
He's not a replacement for Hawkinson. They're not moving Hawkinson. They're probably going to you think they re-sign Hawkinson, extend him?
I sure hope so. I think Hawkinson is a top 3 tight end in this league. You know, he
for sure.
Like for what he did last year in his short time with the Vikings was nothing short of amazing. He was absolutely money. He was one of our most consistent targets. So I'd be really disappointed if the Vikes aren't able to re-sign him.
Yeah, he just looks like he should be a Viking too.
He is.
He's got that Viking style.
He looks like our mascot.
Yes, he does. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking stuff in the offseason, obviously, coming up here. This is kind of recapping, getting caught up, diving back into the podcast. But once the draft gets close, we may even go to the draft party. That's happening April 27th, I believe. They're having a draft party at U.S. Bank Stadium for it, so that could be pretty fun to see.
That would be fun.
But yeah, we'll be talking stuff. Make sure you send us your questions. Throw the questions on the YouTube channel here under the video, and we'll make sure we answer them in our next Vikings podcast because we'll be doing a lot of fan questions as well for the Vikings podcast since things aren't always happening and we just need stuff to talk about. We'll be happy to just dive in. Maybe we'll bring some fans even on the show. Anything else that we didn't talk about, Alex, in this podcast you wanted to make sure we touch on?
Not that's coming to mind right now. No, I think we kind of hit everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in again. Welcome back. Keep helping us grow the channel. You know, we got the podcast. We got some new videos coming out. We're going to be going to some games this off season. Follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. Take a look anywhere you find Hot Dish Sports, and you know it. Skol Vikes.
Skol Vikes.
Skol Vikes.
Skol Vikes. So what off-season games are we going to?
I don't fucking know. I stumbled so hard through that ending.
Off-season games. That's a new one.
Yeah, preseason's what I meant. It's kind of the same thing.